This is part 2 of Unit 6, Lesson 1 for Algebra 1B, where we're looking at forms of quadratic equations. In part 1, we identified the key features of a quadratic function from the graph. So what we're going to look at in part 2 are identifying the forms of the quadratic equations and the key features that go along with it. You should have the first page completed already from the previous video. Again, we're looking at those x-intercepts, y-intercepts, vertices, and line of symmetry. We talk about key features from a parabola, from a quadratic equation. We also can look at the line of symmetry and the direction that the parabola opens. Both of those key features can help us if we're making a quick graph or trying to understand the function that we're working with. Let's move on to the different forms of quadratics. Quadratic functions can be written in 3 different forms. And those different forms can be used to identify different key features quickly. Most of these forms can show you more than one key feature, but the first one listed for each really stands out quickly if you know what to look for. The 3 forms are standard form, factored form, and vertex form. In subsequent lessons, we're going to talk about each of these more specifically. Standard form just looks like standard form of a polynomial, where we go from the highest exponent, so we start with a 2, to the next highest exponent, this would be a 1, to the next highest exponent. That c would have an exponent of 0 on the x, so there is no x term. This is a trinomial. It's got 3 terms here. And the key feature that we want to look out for is the y-intercept. The y-intercept for a standard form equation is the c value. This number here at the end is the y-intercept. Factored form is our next form that we're going to look at. It has 2 binomials inside parentheses. So binomials have 2 terms added or subtracted. When we look at this form, a and b will be actual numbers, just like with standard form where a, b, and c are numbers. Factored form will replace a and b with numbers as well. And if you think back to polynomials, we actually saw that we could go from standard form to factored form if we did that product sum puzzle to factor the trinomial. We'll explore in the next lesson how these 2 forms are connected. The key feature that we see from factored form is the x-intercept. We're going to look at the a value. If this says plus a, then the x-intercept is minus a. Likewise for b, if it's plus 3, for example, then the x-intercept would be minus 3 or negative 3. And then if we look at vertex form, that's our final form. Here we have a, h, and k as our numbers that will be used in the form. A is something that we'll explore a little bit later. It has a specific meaning, but h and k can tell us where to find the vertex. The vertex is the key feature that we get from vertex form. I expect everyone to remember that one. We can find the vertex using h as the x-coordinate and k as the y-coordinate. So those 2 numbers there are the vertex. We want to remember, though, that the h is going to change signs. Because the equation says to subtract h, we need to change that sign there. There's something else we can see from every form, and that is the direction that the graph opens. If there is a negative sign in front, so in front of the x squared, either with this a here, in front of the parentheses, or at this a here, if there's a negative sign, the graph is going to open down. That's where it's an upside down U, like we saw above in graph number 1. So let's take a look at these different equations here and try to identify the form for each one, and then state what key feature it would show. I'm not going to use the table above, simply because I'm giving instruction, but I encourage you to zoom out and look at this table here as a reference, especially as you're working on your own. I'm going to do 3 examples, and then you have a check-in down below that you'll complete. Number 1, this is factored form. We can see that because there are 2 parentheses, and each of those 2 parentheses has a binomial. The key feature that we get from factored form is the x-intercept. I'm just going to call that the x-int. That's all I expect you to know for now, but later on we'll see exactly how to get that, And you may already start to understand, if I show you now, one of the x-intercepts is going to take this this positive 4 and make it a negative 4. So we have negative 4 as an x-intercept. How about this minus 7? What would the intercept be there? If you said positive 7, you are correct. We want to change those signs in factored form when we find the x-intercepts. Since these are intercepts, we'll write them as ordered pairs. They are points on the graph. Again, all I expect you to know at this point right here is that we can find the x-intercepts. That's the part that matters. If we look at the second the second equation, I see a parenthesis, just one parenthesis with an exponent of 2. That's going to look like vertex form up and to the right in that graph, in that table. So this is vertex. And the key feature that we see from vertex form is the vertex. Again, if you can't tell me that, you need to be paying attention to what these names tell you. They're not very creative, those mathematicians. All I expect you to know is that it is the vertex, but if you want to go above and beyond, you can start to identify the h and the k value as the vertex. Make sure, though, that this sign here changes. It's going to be a positive 4, and then the k value would stay at 3. That's this here at the end. It wouldn't change. But the h value needs to change its sign. Last example. Here we have y equals x squared minus 8x plus 12. That is a trinomial, and it's in standard form. Both in the standard form of a polynomial and in the sense that that is the name of this form. It's standard. The key feature that we can find is the y-intercept. We'll call that y-int. And again, that comes from the c value here at the end. So you could just say 12. But the proper format is an ordered pair. It would be 0, 12. Once you get those in your notes, go ahead and try the check-in problems. Tell me the form. Tell me what key feature you can find. Use these examples in the table above, and then you can complete the practice to go along with this lesson and the progress check as well. Contact me if you have any questions.